I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever or whenever you are. This is Joe DeMar, and you are listening to For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment and ecology. And we talk about it in terms of how it's going to affect you, your family, your health, your wallet. And because we're working towards a green future, we're working towards an environmentally sustainable future, a future where there's lots of resources for everyone, including the animals and plants and the ecosystems that support us. And we will get there. Frankly, because we don't actually have much choice. Either we will get there, or this great big global economy and global society we've created is going to collapse. And I know those of you who are listening to this channel, this is normally a sports channel, so and right after my show, don't worry, promptly at 9 o'clock, Mick Gonzalez will be here with the cheap seats, and we'll be back to sports. But for just an hour here Sunday morning, we're going to be considering the environment, the ecology. And it was, speaking of the environment and the climate, and of course climate leads to talk about the weather, which everybody always likes to do. It was raining again this morning. Yeah, driving in one more time, the rain was coming down pretty good between Bowling Green and Toledo. And if you're a farmer, if you're a local farmer, I know that a lot of the farmers here in Northwest Ohio have decided to actually not to plant a crop at all this year because it's just gotten too late in the season. That the farmer, I was actually talking with a farmer yesterday, and she was explaining to me that yes, with global warming, with climate change here, the fall, the first frost might push back. You know, the quote-unquote growing season might be getting longer, but the problem is that the number of hours of sunlight doesn't change. So even though it's warm, even though there's no snow, there's no frost, there's not enough sunlight to bring a crop like corn, for example, all the way up to the point where it's ripe. Because I heard another farmer earlier in the week describe it. He said, well, what we farmers do is we take sunlight and we turn it into food, and that's our job. That's what farmers do. And so we're not changing the number of hours of sunlight. That's at this point that's still beyond the human control. All we're doing is making the planet warmer, and so that does not necessarily translate into increased crop yields. And in fact, it often translates into reduced crop yields, as we're seeing here in Northwest Ohio right now. The summer season, let's see, actually today was the deadline for getting corn in for most farmers, because the insurance companies that issue crop insurance after June 9th won't actually insure a corn crop because the risk of losing the entire crop is just too high. So they say, no, we're not going to insure that. So If you're a farmer, like many of the ones in Northwest Ohio, that right now you expected to be out in your fields and instead you're sitting in the kitchen listening to the radio, give us a call at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Starting about 8:15 is when we're going to open up the phone lines. And we have a good show for you today. We've got a special guest. His name is Daryl Stockburger, and he works for the city of Bowling Green. And he's going to be talking to us all about Bowling Green's wind turbines and solar panels. And specifically, we're going to talk about what's going to happen to those alternative energy projects as a result of this HB6, if this HB6 passes. But that's a few minutes in the future. It's only 8:06 right now, or that'll be at 8:15 is when Daryl's going to call. And we also have, of course, our letter from the future, from the far future. My great-great-granddaughter, Marie I., writes me a letter every Sunday. She's very dependable. And there's a flash of photons next to my bed when I get up in the morning, and there's a letter from the future. I don't know how she does it. She actually won't tell me, but I can write back to her because she has a chest full of letters that I've sent her from the past. And so she's opening the letters from me one at a time as I'm getting the letters from her from the future. So if you have any questions about the future, you can send them to Marie I, and she'll answer. You could send any questions at all or any suggestions for shows or any comments or any criticisms to Joe at joedemare4agreenfuture.org. That's JOEDEMARE foragreenfuture.org. And the 4 is the FOR. Spell out the whole word there. So a lot going on in terms of the ecology and the environment in the world today. Last week we were talking about the wildfires up in Canada. This week it's looking like there's going to be wildfires in California. And in fact, PG&E is turning off electricity to big swaths of California because their transformers have caused some of the biggest wildfires in the state. In last year's huge wildfires that destroyed so many homes and actually killed quite a few Californians. And so this year, PG&E is saying, well, if we were responsible for those fires from our transformers, and if we can get sued for that, then we're just not going to supply electricity. So chunks of California are already, as a result of climate change, sort of dropping back to a pre-electric kind of world. I mean, imagine having your power cut off for these droughts. These dry spells can last for weeks, and so you'd have to go weeks without electricity. And it's not exactly the pre-electric world because you do have the opportunity, we do have the ability to get energy from other sources like wind and sun. So you could meet your basic needs with windmills and solar panels. So your sump pump would keep working and your refrigerator would keep going, but you might not also be able to have your game, your Xbox going 8 hours a day, or you might not be able to have the luxuries. But I used to have a business in New York putting up backup power supplies, and I used a small windmill and a relatively small solar panel, and it would keep a bank of batteries charged. And so if the power went out, it could keep your house, just the essentials, going for 3 to 5 days, depending on how much wind and sun there was, because, of course, it would keep recharging, and depending on how big your house was and how many batteries you had and so forth. But it can be done. I mean, we can. Now, that's the emergency situation. That's if the grid goes down. And some environmentalists argue that we should get rid of the grid, that everybody should just be on their own in terms of electric generation, and it's just, 200 million households that each have their own solar panels and wind turbines and whatever they can afford. I disagree with that. I think the grid is actually one of the most amazing things that people have come up with, because the way the grid works is that people who generate power put their power into the grid wherever they are. And those of us that use the power take the power off the grid from wherever they are. And so the energy can be generated in a distributed way. It can be, you can have your plants literally anywhere. You can have thousands of small plants. What we had when we created the grid were dozens of really huge plants, plants like Davis Bessie that put out 800 megawatts. Of course, the problem with a big centralized generation like that is when your 800 megawatt plant goes down, which Davis Bessie has done a number of times. They've had a number of unplanned outages. Now the whole system can collapse because it's got too few points. So you have to maintain capacity. You have to maintain backup power that can kick in if a big generator like Davis Bessie goes down. And the bigger the generator and the fewer the generators, the more backup power you've got to have. And what we need to do and what we're working for and what we will have in a green future is a distributed generation model. That is lots of little generators. So if you lose any one of them, it doesn't cause a big problem for the grid. And that way we can just, wherever the sun is shining, we can be putting in solar power. Wherever the wind is blowing, we can be putting in wind power. And if we move it around intelligently, we can meet the country's energy demands. And those of you who say, Joe, that's a pipe dream, it can't be done. We've talked about this before. It is being done in other places in the country. It's being done in places like Germany. And, many other countries are switching to wind and solar, closing down their coal and their nukes. And I just wanted to say really quickly, I actually was in the was in the Toledo Blade this past week. They did a nice article because in my role as political director for the Ohio Green Party, and once again, I'm the political director for the Ohio Green Party, but on this show, I'm speaking only for myself, not for the Green Party of Ohio, just as you will, is when you call in at 866-240-1065. I was tasked by the state party to create protests against this House Bill 6, this nuclear and coal bailout bill that'll add money to our electric bills in order to give it to the owners of nuclear and coal plants in Ohio. And so I did. I organized 3 protests. We had one here in Toledo on Monday, one in Columbus on Wednesday, and one in Akron, the home of First Energy, the company that essentially wrote this bill. There were it was very successful. There were over 100 people. We were out where people could see us, and there were people were honking and waving, and we had this model of a wind turbine in Akron, and people had lots of signs. It was fun, I have to admit, but it was pretty tiring to have to set this up all over the state. But we got some very nice press here in Toledo. So if you go to the Toledo Blade and search for HB6 Protest Toledo, you can see some nice pictures, and they did in their story online, they have this nice video that they put together. It was great. And some of you may have seen us out there in front of the old Toledo Edison building. We know Toledo Edison's not in there anymore, but it's still a very good spot to have a protest very highly visible. And why, you may ask, why have we been driven to protesting? Why have we been driven to going out on the street? Well, because the problem is so acute, and this bill, House Bill 6, which takes money away from energy efficiency and it takes money away from alternative energy and gives it to coal and nuclear power, this bill is so backwards. And we went through the proper channels. We testified at the hearings. We've talked to our senators, and would you please call your senator, also your state senator, and tell them to vote no on HB 6, because this is a bill that must be stopped. We did all that, and the law that came out of that process was the exact opposite of what 75% of the people, it was 3-1 against the bill, and then the legislators in the House all heard all this testimony, and then they wrote a bill that did exactly the opposite of what the three out of the 4 people who spoke asked for. In other words, they did a bill that will take Toledo back to the 1950s in terms of its electrical generation methods, and essentially throw the whole state back into the late 1900s in terms of its technology, because the wind and sun are the future. And one thing that this bill will do is heavily penalize the communities around Ohio that actually have invested in clean technology, that have invested in wind and the sun. And I believe we have online now a person who knows all about that firsthand. Daryl, are you with us? Good morning, and thank you for joining us on For a Green Future.
Well, thank you very much. I am very glad to be here.
Great. Could you just tell us, Daryl, what your actual official title is in the city of Bowling Green?
I am the Assistant Director of Utilities for the city of Bowling Green.
Okay. And so you were there, you were instrumental as Bowling Green installed its wind turbines about 10 years ago and its solar panels just recently.
Yes, that's quite correct. I was in Bowling Green when the wind turbines were installed in the years 2003 and 2004. And more recently, about 2 years ago, the solar panels as well.
Mm-hmm. And field there in Bowling Green, is that still the largest solar installation in Ohio right now?
Yes, it is, although currently there are several much larger installations that are contemplated and even under construction. The one that is connected to BG continues to be the largest in the state of Ohio at 20 megawatts, occupying a field of approximately 166 acres.
Okay. And so how would you describe BG's experience with wind power and solar power? Do you think, has this largely been successful? Has it achieved the goals that the city set out when we started building these projects?
In my opinion, they absolutely have. In fact, the production from the wind turbines was very, very close to expectations, depending on our study. And also the solar panels, operating for 2 full years now, are producing about exactly what they were projected to produce.
Oh, that's great. And so, on this show, we've been talking about HB6 for quite a while, but we really haven't gone into what HB6 is going to do to municipalities like Bowling Green that have invested in wind and solar. That's been kind of in the news down there. Could you just sort of tell us if this bill passes the way it is right now, what that would mean for Bowling Green?
Well, House Bill 6 has an indirect effect to Bowling Green. You see, the city currently utilizes about 40% of its electric supply from renewable energy resources. House Bill 6 has the effect of removing the portfolio standards for renewable energy for the state's utilities, and this in effect will reduce the need for renewable energy certificates. And that market's very important to the city of Bowling Green, as well as many developers in the state of Ohio, because it provides a methodology to support renewable energy.
So, could we just back up half a step here and just describe for the audience what exactly a renewable energy credit is?
Renewable energy credit is based on 1,000 kilowatt hours of energy being produced by renewable energy resources. For example, if you as a customer, even though you don't have solar panels or wind turbines on your property, you can choose to participate and support in green energy in Ohio by the purchase of renewable energy certificates. So if you buy one renewable energy certificate, it is certified by an independent third party, in our case, Green E, certified that that amount of energy was indeed created by a renewable energy project, whether that's wind, solar, landfill gas, small hydro, etc.
So if we see a business, let's say, that says, okay, we use 100% renewable energy to make our shoes or our cereal or whatever, that could be because they've bought these credits from generators like Bowling Green and other entities that actually put solar and wind onto the grid.
They would at least be able to produce the renewable energy certificates. Of course, Bowling Green's energy is for its customers, its citizens. However, we do participate in the region-wide and statewide programs for the renewable energy certificates.
Okay. Yeah, well, it sounds pretty good, and it sounds like it's a win-win. It's a win-win. It's a win for BG anyway. How much would BG stand to lose if this bill goes through and the renewable energy credit market is essentially wiped out in Ohio?
Well, if they are totally wiped out, it would be approximately $1 million per year. We don't anticipate a complete wipeout because the investor-owned utilities and others are not the only purchasers of renewable energy certificates. For example, if you live in Bowling Green or are a Bowling Green customer, you can purchase through EcoSmart energy program. You can purchase certificates and have the equivalent of supporting green energy for your entire household supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big blow for a city for any city really. I mean, $1 million. It's the saying that you're starting to talk about real money here. Let me ask you, how arduous, how difficult was it, and how long did it take to get Bowling Green solar field up? Because a lot of people are saying it's impossible to put large amounts of wind and sun up, but Bowling Green has done it. And how hard was it?
Well, the wind turbines took about 2 months 2 years for completing the design and the zoning and the paperwork for installation. And were actually then built in as little as 30 days each. The solar, a similar situation for the planning and the engineering, but about 6 months to build the project.
Okay, so 6 months to build, but 2 years to go through the paperwork, basically. Okay, so the argument that it's incredibly difficult to put up things like windmills and solar panels, part of that difficulty is just sort of being created by regulation. That's interesting. So just 6 months to build. It's a really impressive site. I don't know if any of our how many of our listening audiences have been out there, but that field is just huge, and you're looking at doing some environmentally friendly things with it this year, aren't you? You've got some projects going on to.
Absolutely. In fact, this past winter, there was a seeding done for pollinators, as well as pollinator bushes, hoping to make the area surrounding the solar field very conducive to species such as bees, butterflies, birds, etc.
Hummingbirds and so forth. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. You take one step towards a green future, and that can kind of enable you to take more steps, because it's not really costing a ton of money to maintain all these plants that pollinators use.
Well, we are hoping that it will actually save money for the city, in that the pollinators typically are not needing to be mowed more than once or twice a year, versus 4 to 6 times a year for the grass.
Oh, that's cool. All right, 866-240-1065. I mean, here in northwestern Ohio, largely the discussion of wind and solar is sort of theoretical, but you have before you someone who has actually helped with the installation of wind and solar here in northwest Ohio, someone who knows how it's done. If you have any questions for Daryl, give us a call in the next couple minutes here, 866-240-1065. And one point I wanted to make, Daryl, and I suspect that we have people listening here who normally would be out in the fields. if those fields had wind turbines in them, if wind were developed in some of these farmlands, you can farm, you can grow right up to the base of a turbine, but those fields would be generating revenue right now. Even though they can't be planted, they'd still be generating some money. Do you have any idea, like super roughly, how much money a wind turbine on a farm could generate in terms of payments to the landowner?
Now, farmers hosting wind turbines are going to be negotiating with the developer. The city of Bowling Green is in a little bit different situation in that for our wind turbines, we partnered with the Wood County Commissioners at the Wood County landfill. And so the city of Bowling Green does pay more than what the county obtains from farm rent, but not as much as a farmer might benefit from a private development.
And it does vary from installation to installation. It's a matter of negotiation when they put the turbine in. It's, so it's a field that it only takes up 45 by 45 roughly in your field, and you could just sit there and instead of just looking at your field doing nothing right now, you could be looking at it generating revenue as the wind blades are turning.
Yes, the setback law that has been established by the state of Ohio is much more stringent than anything that we had initially when the city of Bowling Green installed the turbines at the landfill. In fact, today we would not be able to install as many wind turbines as we did back at that time.
Oh, yeah. Thanks to the 2014 setback laws that effectively stopped wind farms in Ohio. Although it was kind of encouraging on Friday as we were driving to Akron on Route 6 there, we did actually pass 3 utility scale wind turbine blades on the back of 3 different trucks on their way, presumably on their way to an installation. Yeah, do you know how they were huge? I couldn't say exactly how long they were, but do you have any idea, like the length of blades in a modern wind turbine?
In our case, the windmill blades are about 134 feet long, but today's wind turbines designed to produce much more in low wind speed areas have blades that are maybe 20 or 30 feet longer than that.
So they're just amazing to look at. And all right. Well, I think we've got to move along. Daryl, thank you very much for calling in. We got to get our messages from our sponsors in right now. But just sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down thing if you're for Bowling Green and wind and solar power. I guess you're actually looking to put in more solar now, aren't you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have been studying for some time the possibility of a 10 megawatt size of facility, and we would very much like to be successful creating what is known as a community solar project, and that's where the community, our customers for Bowling Green, would be invited to invest in the facility, perhaps through a lease type of situation. For example, if you have a house that doesn't have suitable roofing space, or you're an apartment dweller, you would actually still be able to participate in solar energy.
Okay, so that's cool. So you can actually join in the solar revolution there, even if you're living in a small apartment. Would people outside of Bowling Green's municipal utility be able to do this? Could, say, people in Columbus or Toledo buy or lease some of Bowling Green's community solar panels?
Theoretically, that could happen. However, the city of Bowling Green is owned by the citizens, and the project is intended for the customers of Bowling Green. All
right. Well, thank you, Daryl. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Well, have a great day. So that was Daryl Stockburger. And if you have any questions about solar or wind in Bowling Green, call in anyway, even though Daryl has gone back to his leisurely Sunday morning. We'll talk about it. We're always willing to talk about any environmental question you have or any environmental topic here on For a Green Future at 866-240-1065. But right now we're going to hear from our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. One of our sponsors of this hour is the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and nature preserves around Wood County, which are open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And they've always got a ton of things going on at the Wood County Park District. And if you want to see all of them, you can go to www.wcparks.org or call the Wood County Park District headquarters at 419-353-1897. And we just have time to go through some of the things that are happening this upcoming week. So on Monday, tomorrow, they're going to have late harvest garden planting. That's from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Carter Historic Farm, 18331 Carter Road in Bowling Green. And there you'll help if you show up for that, you'll help plant some of the fruits and vegetables that'll be used later in the year for farm programming. The leader of this project is Arden Pontash and Corrine Gordon. And whenever you want to register for a volunteer activity at the Wood County Parks, you go to wcparks.galaxydigital.com. Then on Tuesday, June 11th, they're going to be teaching bird songs, Bird Song ID, and that's from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the Cedar Creeks Preserve at 4575 Walbridge Road in Northwood. There you can go and get some experience listening for breeding birds as we build upon concepts discussed in, they had a program back in March learning about bird songs. Participation, you don't have to have been to the March program in order to show up on Tuesday. And for that, again, you register at wcparks.org. Also on Tuesday and also on Thursday, they have a part 1, part 2 here. They're going to be talking about archery skills. They're having a program called The Complete Archer. And the Tuesday, that's June 11th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., and then Thursday, June 13th, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the brand-new Arrowwood Archery Range, which is at 11126 Linwood Road in Bowling Green, which that's a little difficult to get to. But if you're familiar with Bowling Green or Wood County at all, there's they have the Historical Society Museum there, and it's kind of round back behind that. You've got to sort of go around the block, but it's within walking distance, but it's off by itself at 1126 Linwood Road in Bowling Green. And there you can transform into an arrow-slinging archer. And this 2-session course is designed to equip the novice with the tools to safely navigate the archery range and become familiar with basic archery equipment and create a solid foundation to work on precision and accuracy. And again, you would go to the website, wcparks.org, or call 353-1897. Also on Thursday, they're going to be planting native plants at the Beaver Creek Preserve. That's 23028 Long Judson Road in Grand Rapids. And they're going to be planting natives from the Wood County Park District's greenhouses. And they only have a few thousand plants to get into the park, so everyone's welcome to dig in and help. They will provide the tools, and you don't need any experience. So sign up, again, at wcparks.galaxydigital.com. They have a program for teenagers on Friday, for June 14th, from 9 a.m. to noon. So if you've got somebody in the house who's kind of driving you crazy because school is out already, take them over to the WW Knight Nature Preserve, which is at 29530 White Road in Perrysburg. And they're going to explore the wetlands out there. They're going to search for frogs and other macroinvertebrates in and around the wetlands, and they learn how wetland ecosystems impact our lives. Then on Saturday, June 15th, there's going to be woody plant removal, invasive species removal at the Bradner Preserve at the Timmins Road parking lot, 11540 Timmins Road in Bradner. And it's at volunteer there at wcparks.galaxydigital.com. And finally, Also on Saturday at the same time, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Three Meadows Pond, which is at 700 Three Meadows Drive in Perrysburg. You can join the American Canoeing Association instructors, and they will teach you to kayak touring safety and rescue skills. And you should be prepared to swim as part of this course, and it'll teach you how to help keep all your boats afloat and prepare you for when they don't float. And you can see the online description for full details. This one actually you have to register for by tomorrow. The cost is $35, and if you're a member of the Friends of the Wood County Parks, it's only $30. Register for that at www.wcparks.org. And so that's just a taste of what's coming up. I know I went through those really quickly, but if you want to hear them again, remember, For a Green Future is rebroadcast both as a podcast. You just search for A Green Future, and on YouTube at For a Green Future. So the podcast and YouTube videos should be up before the end of today, so that you can, if you needed to go back and get some of those details again, they'll be on there. All right, so our other sponsor for this hour is DeMar Consulting. DeMar Consulting is a computer consulting business, and the difference is that they will come to your home. So there's no need to disconnect your computer, stick it in your trunk, and drive to a store. If you're having software troubles, if you need to back up your computer, if your computer maybe isn't talking to your printer, if you're having any of those sorts of problems, maybe you've just got some new software in and you don't actually know how to use it to the best abilities, contact DeMar Consulting, and they will come out to your house at a very reasonable rate. They'll walk you through it. They will give you advice, and everyone who works for DeMar Consulting has a degree in computer science, so you know that they know what they're talking about. The ways to get in touch with DeMar Consulting is by phone. You can call or text them at 419-973-3000. That's 419-973-3000. Or you can go to their website, demarconsulting.com, and DeMar is spelled D-E-M-A-R-E, then the word consulting.com. So for all your home computing needs. All right, so we have, it's almost quarter till, and I think we're going to just go right into our letter from the future so that I don't forget it again. A couple weeks ago, I actually forgot to read the letter. It was, Marie I is so dependable, and here I went and dropped the ball. So I'm going to make sure I get it in this week. All right, here is the letter from the future. Dear Great-Great-Grandpa, things are going very well here in 2299 on the Colo Peninsula. Every day the drill creating the hole where we will eventually dispose of your time's nuclear waste gets a little deeper. All of us scientists and engineers are working hard to get this job done because we know it's going to protect all our descendants for hundreds of thousands of years from the dangerous wastes created in your time. I've told you before that there's about 2 billion people on Earth, down from the 7 billion in your time. Part of the reason were some huge disasters in your future that I can't tell you about, but part of it is that we've all just decided to limit our number of children to 1 each. So a couple is expected to have 2 children. Now, they can have more than 2 if they have a friend who has decided not to have any children of their own. They could formally transfer that right to have a child to another couple. Then that person is expected to help support the child as they grow up. It's really quite beautiful. This is not a law or anything. It's just what we've all decided to do. I don't know if I'm ever going to have a child of my own. As you know, my love life is a shambles. I've broken it off with Igor, and how can I go back to Michael after telling him that I chose someone else? So I've been throwing myself into virtual soccer. There's always people ready to play a pickup game on the net. Of course, the players can be anywhere on the earth, and the ball is virtual, but there's just as much running, and it's just as hard as soccer at your time. We just don't have to worry about brain damage from hitting the virtual soccer ball. Don't worry, Great-Great-Grandpa. I'll figure this out, and so will you. Keep working towards a green future. It will happen. Love, Marie I. Isn't that a nice letter? My poor great-great-granddaughter's still having some problems there with her love life, but I'm sure she will figure it out. So here we are. It is 8:45. We've got 15 minutes left in the show. Plenty of time for a call at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. What did you think of the interview with Daryl? Again, I've known Daryl for quite a while, and he's an extremely practical person. He looks at things. He's not coming at anything from sort of a philosophy or theory. He's just like, oh, you want wind turbines? Okay, here's how you put up wind turbines. Oh, you want solar panels? All right, let's put up some solar panels. And I have a lot of admiration for him because that kind of person is kind of rare, and we need more of them in our society because there's a lot of things we've got to get done. One of those things, of course, is stopping carbon. We have to completely stop the carbon getting put into the air. And one aspect of the carbon industry is the plastics industry. And a few weeks ago, we had Leitra Harper on talking about how they're planning to essentially destroy a big chunk of southwest Ohio in order to put up a plant to build plastics on the Ohio River using the fracked gas from the fracking down there in southwest Ohio. And it's just another example of us building the wrong kind of infrastructure. They're going to pour billions of dollars into this plant to make plastics at a time when we know that we have to be transitioning away from plastics. And there's a number of ways we can transition away from plastics. The European Union, they started out with a plastic bag ban, and then they have moved on to banning all single-use plastics. Now, in the city of Bowling Green, there's also a proposed plastic bag ban, and in fact, on Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the city council chambers, they're having a meeting of the committee of the whole to talk about the ban because it's already had one reading in city council, and it's supposed to just have 2 more readings and then get enacted, but apparently they want to make some changes. So if you're interested in that plastic bag ban, show up at the city council chambers Tuesday at 6. But the necessity of getting away from carbon, of stopping putting carbon in the atmosphere, got demonstrated in India this past week. India is having a terrible, terrible heat wave. And when you're thinking heat wave, you're thinking around here we think, oh, in the 90s, maybe over 100. Well, in India this past week, temperatures have been 50.3 degrees Celsius. Now, if you're wondering, I'll tell you how much that is in Fahrenheit in a minute, but I just want to remind you from your old high school science classes that Celsius measures up to the temperature of boiling water at 100. And so it goes from 0, where water freezes, to 100, where water boils. And so if you're over 50 degrees Celsius, and they were at 50.3, you're more than halfway to boiling water. And so that actually turns out to be 122.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So just think about that for a minute, 122.5 degrees. If you go out in that kind of weather for any length of time, it will literally cook your brain, because humans are not designed to operate at those temperatures. It's just insane. And of course, if humans can't survive there, then the trees are going to die, and animals can't survive either. There's reports in India of entire troops of monkeys just dying and falling out of the trees right now. And tigers are leaving the forests and coming into the villages because they're trying to find water. There's no water to find. And, in fact, fights over water in India right now are people are being killed. People are literally fighting over water trucks that are coming in to try to give people some water. And it's a foretaste of what will happen all over the globe if we don't if we don't stop putting carbon in the air. And we know how to do it. Daryl was just on, and they're doing it down there in Bowling Green. Now, unfortunately, because they've only got 4 wind turbines, and they have the solar panels, the 20 megawatt installation, unfortunately, those two together only add up to about 3% of the demand in the city of Bowling Green. So it's not enough, but it's a start, and it demonstrates that we can meet all our needs that way, and that's being demonstrated over and over again. And if you say, oh, well, Joe, that's India. India's always got hot weather. It's always hotter than here. That's true, but again, last week's show was fire and water. The flip side, here we've got too much rain. And I don't know, have you tried to get on the ferry? Lately, I've been seeing pictures on the internet that the ferry dock on Lake Erie there to get out to the islands, that the ferry dock is actually underwater. That the ferry is pulling up and it's dropping its little ramp there, but the ramp goes into the water and there's people. You have to wade. Once you get off the ferry, you've got to actually wade into the shore. The water can be, it looks like it can be almost knee deep there, because Lake Erie's at record levels because we've had record rains. And the people who deny global warming, the people who are, let's say, I don't know, presidents of certain countries, the people who do that, they make the argument, there's always been weather extremes. There's always been, times when there's droughts, and there's times when there's too much rain, and that's nothing new. Yeah, that's true, except that the scale is new. I mean, there's always been, sometimes you'll always get a flood somewhere, you'll always have a heat wave somewhere, but what's happening now is happening all over the globe, and it's reaching records that have never been reached before in terms of temperature and rainfall. And it's happening more and more often, and it's happening right along the predictions made by 20 years ago by computer simulations of the atmosphere. When they had computer simulations and they put in there what's going to happen if we increase carbon by this much or increase it by that much, these things were exactly predicted. And so the people back then were like, computer models, they're inaccurate, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Testing them for 20 years proves that they're accurate. Now, there's an organization that gives out the Ig Nobel Science Awards. That is, they give an award. It's a secular humanist organization, and they give awards every year for experiments which cannot and should not be repeated because they're so ridiculous. And I think I'm going to nominate this year global climate modeling to get one of these Ig Nobel awards, because what we did was we did an experiment where we tested these models by actually doing the terrible thing that they were warning against, and it turned out they were right. And so, a species looking at the human race right now from outside, if there are aliens and if they were watching us, if there's some sort of galactic intelligence scale, we may not be doing too well on that right now, because we had the information, we made the predictions, then we ran the experiment, we added the carbon, and guess what? The predictions were exactly right. What do you think? 866-240-1065. Are we going to continue this experiment all the way to the end? Are we going to test these predictions of incredible droughts and incredible wildfires? And essentially, the scientists right now are panicking. I mean, if you're a scientist, if you're somebody who actually understands the science of climate, you're panicking because you understand what's going on. The rest of the human race doesn't seem to be panicking, which, panic is not that great a thing. I'm not one for panic. If you know me personally, I'm a pretty even-keeled guy, But what we do have to do is something. We do have to start acting. And in other parts of the world, they are acting, like in the European Union, where they've banned single-use plastics. They're also closing their nuke plants and closing their coal plants. And in the midst of all these terrible things, in the midst of all this, like the heat waves in India that are killing people, there are some bright spots. For example, England this past month had more than 2 weeks straight where they did not use coal at all. England has gone heavily into wind and solar power, and they've been able to shut their coal plants down completely. And it was the first time, in the article I read, it said it was the first time since the 1800s when England did not use coal power at all. And we could be there too. I mean, that's one thing about the U.S. I mean, if we decide to do something, we get it done. And we usually do it better than anybody else, in my opinion, once we decide to do it, once we commit to doing it. And it's an incredible source of frustration to me when we say things like we've got to switch to wind and sun, and they come back with all these engineering problems. They're like, oh, well, how do you store the power when the sun's not shining? And it's like, that's an engineering problem. And Americans are the best engineers on the planet, in my opinion. And so if we decide we're going to figure out how to deal with intermittency, we will lick that problem. And so all these naysayers that throw up, oh, we can't do it, they wail, weep and wail. Oh, we can't change because, we can't do this, we can't do that. I'm like, yes, we can. We could do it better than anyone else on the planet if we choose to do it. And unfortunately, instead, right now, the Ohio State Legislature is choosing not to do it. With this House Bill 6, which is why we were out protesting in Toledo and Columbus and Akron, the Ohio State Legislature is trying to take us back to the 1950s. They're trying to say, okay, you can have coal and you can have nukes, but that's it, And they mouth, all the legislators get up there and say, I'm not opposed to wind and sun. But then they put in place laws like HB 6, which essentially prohibit wind and do nothing to increase solar power. And in fact, as you heard from Daryl, it actually hurts solar power because it eliminates the credit system, the renewable energy credit system. So it makes it more difficult to put up wind and sun. So never, ever, ever listen to a politician when they say something like, I'm not opposed to alternative energy, because what you have to do with politicians is you have to look at what they actually do. Never listen to what they say. Ignore what they say. Look at what they do. And what the Republicans, and unfortunately many, like about a third of the Democrats in the state legislature right now, what they are doing is trying to prevent the green future. They're trying to prevent wind and sun from becoming significant energy sources. They want them to stay at the tiny little percentage that they're at right now. Daryl was saying 1.5, because then they can point to them and say, oh, look, we're doing it. But they don't want them to become a significant amount of our future, and they must be. So this week, call your state senators, tell them no on HB 6. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMar. It's been a pleasure. Have a great day.
The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe